So we are going to discuss Hyperdocs very briefly. So Hyperdocs, if you're not familiar, they are an interactive digital lesson that replaces the worksheet/lecture method of delivering instruction. This definition was originally said, it was a Google document, but I decided to change that terminology because when Hyperdocs started, it was just Google that you used it with, but now because technology changes so quickly and for the better, there's many different ways that you could do a Hyperdocs, so I thought I would change that around a little bit. So really with a Hyperdoc, traditionally, the idea would be that you could use it in your classroom. And I'm a spoiled teacher, I'm not gonna lie to anybody. I have technology where I work, I have a computer lab, I'm spoiled rotten, I have big, beautiful monitors for my students to use so they could split their screen and be working on Hyperdocs beautifully. And in the past, I would have said, don't you dare use it with a phone because that could be a nightmare, but guess what happens? Now I'm in the situation where my students all have cell phones and they're working on their own. So I've had to modify, and I've been watching a series of webinars this week, modify my own Hyperdocs so that I can find a way to use them in remote learning. And I've been watching the Hyperdocs girls who created it, and they've done a bunch of webinars this week saying the exact same thing. So really what a Hyperdoc is it's a lesson that has interactive links within. So you have, instead of having your activities just scattered, you have them all laid out in one place. So the best way to show you, I'm going to give you a couple of examples in just a moment. But first, it's kind of important to understand what they are and what they're not. Because a Hyperdoc basically allows for students to collaborate with one another through links embedded in the doc or through sharing before, during, or after. So an example of that would be, if you know what a Padlet is, students would be directed to go to a Padlet and they could all share their ideas or brainstorming ideas or their thoughts or something like that. It's something that is created either within the doc or through a link embedded in the doc. So students really are able to show what they know. They're constantly interacting with the original document. A key piece of the quality of Hyperdoc assignment is that students reflect upon their learning and engage in a process that allows for students to apply what they have learned. The idea is really exploration for students to go out there and learn for themselves, like going on to different places, different activities, that sort of thing. But at the same time, the teacher traditionally is going to be there with them to do normal class activities. And students connect what they have learned to other subject areas, topics, and even apply what they have learned to the real world. What it is not is just a document with hyperlinks. That's where people sometimes get confused. They'll say, I already make a Hyperdoc. Look, I have a piece of paper and it has all these hyperlinks on there. That's not what it is. It's an actual interactive document where the student is actually engaging in the content on that document. So with that type of a thing, there's no opportunities for students to really create anything. They're just going to random sites, and that is not at all what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to monitor the students as they go. They will consume, in that situation, they would consume information through the sites they are linked to, but they're not actually engaged. So to get us to have a better understanding, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So I did two different things here, and I hope I have time to show both of these. I'm using one that we actually did live on Monday night. We did a combined class with Claire Gilliam. She's actually in here right now. But we did a combined class, and we had a big challenge ahead of us because we had ABE and ASE students, so we had a combined class, which we don't usually do that, but we really decided we needed to help each other out. So I decided to use Wakelet to create a Hyperdoc. The difference of this, the reason I chose Wakelet, let me explain that first, is my original lesson I called a digital lesson, meaning that anybody could do it. So I created it with the intent of anybody can access this lesson, anybody can participate in the lesson. So I made it more front-facing so that you didn't have to have a Google account. I didn't have to make a copy for everybody or anything like that. So literally anybody could do it on their own. I edited this a little bit so that it would be specific to my remote class because I knew this was going to be different. Because now I have a room full of students. That's what I envisioned, a room full of students that only have cell phones. So instead of doing it where they're the ones actually engaged on the document, I decided that we would just go through each step together. So this one was, obviously it's about the coronavirus. And so the first thing we did is I linked it to a KWL chart, and they just went to a Google document where we talk about what we know and what we want to know. And I just typed for them. So we were able to have an actual discussion about it. And then from there, we do a brief reading about it and then discuss the reading. And then I took them to an Edpuzzle video, which, if you're not familiar, is interactive video lessons. And this is where I had a snag because I did not know that there was a feature on Zoom that you could share your audio, but we figured out a way to make it work either way so that they could hear it. And normally what I would do is have them go do the Edpuzzle on their own, but I was really, really trying to avoid them doing too many things on their own, on their phones. That was going to go outside of our lesson because I had a lot of different technology level of students. So I didn't want them to go somewhere and never come back. So I was just trying to keep them there with me the entire time. And then we go through a few more reading sections. And we went to this, it's called a formative. If you're not familiar, it's called Go Formative, where we did an assessment, but we just did it together. Traditionally, again, I would have them do this on their own. And then we did another group reading. And then at the end, we were able to play quizzes on, that was the one time I took them, let them go ahead and go on their own with their phones, just not to overwhelm them with technology, but to have a little bit of fun. While we're learning. We then went back to our KWL chart to say what we learned, and then we took our classes to different places on Actively Learn. I took mine to my class, Claire took hers to hers, so that they could do their level of reading assignments, basically. So the other thing, though, is this has really given me an opportunity, though, because obviously I'm not getting all of my students attending like a Zoom class, because they can't, and we all know, I'm sure everybody's going through that. So I'm getting about 50% of them to show up. So I went ahead, though, and I've made the assignment available to my other students by putting it in Google Classroom. That way they still have an opportunity to do it. But I also put it on Google Classroom for those students who might be a higher level and want to work at their own pace, or maybe they just work better independently. So I still do have an opportunity there for differentiation. It's just a much different way of differentiating than I have in the past. So Wakelet is really, it's a curation tool. So it's basically a place where you can, basically you're trying to curate a list of things. You want to keep it very high quality, that sort of thing, but it can be used in different ways. Obviously, I've been using it for digital lessons. I don't always use it. In this case, I used a Wakelet because it's nice and clean, for one thing. I like the nice clean interface, and so it's pretty easy to follow, and you can go step by step. But this time I did it because I wanted to be able to share it with anyone, and I wanted anyone to be able to participate. So I basically put it on the internet, and I've seen all sorts of different people have been doing it. Because you have like a Padlet on there, and so everybody's contributing. And if I did a Google document, there's more complications involved. I'd have to put it, I mean, first of all, everybody has to have a Gmail account. And then when I do it, I put it on Google Classroom, and then I force a copy so that students have a copy of their own, and then they submit it, and that was traditionally how I would do it. But I knew, because we were coming into this different situation, that I just wanted to do something that I could maybe even share with my teachers in case they wanted to distribute it to their students, so that we had, you know, and plus I just felt like the information was important also. But Wakelet is just a really cool tool. I think we're talking about doing some presentations on it, and Texas for sure.